let's take let me just take a moment and introduce our premier keynote guest of honor speaker, John Fund. John writes a weekly On the Trail column for the Wall Street Journal and is the author of a book, Stealing Elections, How the Voter Fraud Threatens Our Democracy. I think most appropriate for this day and age, unfortunately. Mr. Fund joined the Wall Street Journal in April of 1984 as deputy editorial features editor. He became an editorial page writer specializing in politics and government in October of 1986 and was a member of the journal's editorial board from 1995 through 2001. John worked as a research analyst for the California State Legislature in Sacramento before beginning his journalism career in 1982 as a reporter for the syndicated columnist Evans and Novak in 1983. In 1993, he received the Warren Brooks Award for Journalistic Excellence from the American Legislative Exchange Council. He and former Pennsylvania Representative James Coyne are co-authors of a book, Cleaning House, America's Campaign for Term Limits. Mr. Fund attended California State University, where he studied both journalism and economics. Let's give John Fund a great welcome. John.
I'll tell you what's a big plus in my book. Political candidates come and go, and I always pay attention to those who don't quite make it, what they do afterwards. Do they pack up and go home and leave the political fray? Or do they stay and fight? And do they fight for ideas as well as for their own political future? And the fact that Ron Gidwitz and Mr. Oberweis are here, a couple of others, big pluses in my book. I almost didn't make it to Chicago yesterday. I was in Washington, D.C. at National Airport and was going through the terminal on the way to my plane, and I ran into a freshman member of Congress who was wandering around the terminal looking completely distraught, muttering to himself. And I'd met him on the campaign trail last year, and I stopped and said, "What's wrong?" And he looked up at me with this combination of fear and anxiety and said, "I didn't mean to break the rules. I'm really sorry." I said, "Well, what did you do, man?" He says, "Do you think the leadership will forgive me? I'm new here. I mean, I've only been here a few months." And I said, "Well, what did you do?" And he says, "Do you think Speaker Pelosi will forgive me?" And I said, "First, tell me what you did." And he looks up at me and he says, "I'm sorry, I forgot, but just now I accidentally spent my own money." Believe me, that's not as far from the truth as you'd like to think. I love to speak for Americans for Prosperity, not only because I think that they're a worthwhile group, but because my job in part is to get outside the Beltway and outside of New York City and spend time figuring out what people out in the country think. And I like to think of you not as my audience, but as my focus group. So I'm going to try to get to your questions as fast as possible, because I'm here not just to talk at you, but to hear from you and what your concerns are. So what I'd like to do is just give you a very quick overview of what I think some of the challenges and some of the opportunities are nationally, because Joe has given you a good summary of Illinois. And let's be honest, these are tough times. But, you know, it's an old cliche that the Chinese symbol for crisis is also the Chinese symbol for opportunity, and it is also the case here. Give you three challenges that we have, and these are tough ones. Healthcare. The 2008 election is going to decide what kind of healthcare we have in this country. It's that simple. We're either going to move towards a centralized government system, more like what Hillary Care was proposed 13 years ago, and what Hillary 2.0 is going to be proposed later this year, or we're going to move to a consumer-oriented free market system that finally gets us away from that accident of history whereby we got tied to an employer-based healthcare system in World War II. Why? Because we had wage and price controls, and the only way that businesses could compete in securing labor was on fringe benefits. And what's the biggest fringe benefit they could offer? It was healthcare. Complete accident of history that we ended up with the system that we had. Now that system, given the decentralized nature of our workforce and people who have 10 to 12 jobs on average in their career, it's clear that system is failing. So we have to decide whether we're going to move towards a centralized system or a free market system. And the 2008 election is going to decide that. Luckily, Michael Moore's film Sicko, which premieres Friday of this week, is an opportunity. Because I've watched the film, it's effective in its own way, but it is relentlessly ideological in the sense it doesn't just trash our current system, which you can easily do, but it literally plumps for a complete government single-payer healthcare solution, going even beyond what many European countries have. And that's a debate I'm happy to have. Because what I'm worried about is Hillary Clinton obscuring everything. What I want are the left-wing bloggers and the left-wing activists to say Hillary's not going too far enough. Let's have a real honest debate between real choices. And I think the left wing is going to do their job, and they have their symbol in their movie, Michael Moore, Sicko. Now you have to do your job and come up with an alternative to that. And I think that there are certainly groups like Heartland and others that have done that, the Cato Institute. There are a lot of groups that have proposed free market healthcare solutions. Governor Romney had a very interesting proposal in Massachusetts. I could have gone along with parts of it, except for the only problem, he didn't deregulate the insurance market. So all of those mandates that you have to have a Cadillac plan remained in place. What we really need are lots of choices for people. The same kind of choices we give for every other aspect of our economy. We need to have people offered a Chevrolet plan if they can't afford a Cadillac plan. And we need to be able to deregulate the market and offer health savings accounts and catastrophic health plans and other things. Those aren't a full solution, but they will get us a long way, light years away from where we are now. Second challenge. This is an opportunity too. Democrats really, really have hated talk radio for a long, long time. And now Dianne Feinstein, the senator from California, yesterday on Fox News admitted that they're thinking about bringing back the Fairness Doctrine. What's the Fairness Doctrine? It basically says you can't discuss anything on the public airwaves unless you give balance, equal time for free to an opposing point of view. It's one of the reasons why everything was so sterile and non-confrontational before 1987, Ronald Reagan's abolition of the Fairness Doctrine. By the way, it's no accident, comrade, that your Rush Limbaugh began broadcasting was 1987. There's no accident to that. It opened up talk radio, which, by the way, is very market-driven. 29% of talk radio hosts are liberal, 71% are conservative. It's just that the conservatives are so much more popular, they have 85% of the market. That's called the market. After all, that's roughly the same percentage of liberal versus conservative thought on your local PBS station, which, or NPR. So I view that as sort of a balance. They've got NPR, conservatives have talk radio. And let's be clear what the Fairness Doctrine is really all about. Bill Reuter, who was the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for John F. Kennedy in 1961, discussed how the Kennedy administration used the Fairness Doctrine. Our massive strategy, this is a quote, our massive strategy was to so flood conservative broadcasters with complaints that the legal costs and the intimidation would be so great they would have to give up the criticism they were making of our administration, unquote. This is Kennedy's Assistant Secretary of Commerce. On the other side, Richard Nixon loved the Fairness Doctrine. In October 1969, which was the month where all the anti-war demonstrations reached their peak over Vietnam, he told his aides 21 times in that 1 month, according to the tapes, go get so-and-so with the Fairness Doctrine. Go get so-and-so by revoking their license. Now, luckily, his aides, knowing Nixon was blowing off steam, ignored most of his requests, but they didn't ignore all of them, and they eventually got him into trouble, as you all know. The Fairness Doctrine is an open invitation for the government to harass and intimidate people that they don't agree with. The last challenge is related to the book that was mentioned by Ron, voter fraud. This U.S. attorney scandal, yes, it was badly handled. Especially since most of these U.S. attorneys that were fired or replaced had been in their jobs 4 or 5 years. That's the normal rotation. You serve 4 or 5 years, and the second term you rotate off, give somebody else a chance.